Episode 15, 2014, Part 2. The year that is drawing towards its close has been filled with the blessings of fruitful fields and healthful skies. To these bounties, which are so constantly enjoyed that we are prone to forget the source from which they come, others have been added, which are of so extraordinary a nature that they cannot fail to penetrate and soften even the heart which is habitually insensible.
Now, on Inside the Buffalo...
Wait! Can't use that title. How about this? All right.
So, okay, we're getting into the 2014 season. After all of that, after nearly an hour, we are finally coming into the 2014 season. Friday, August 29th, the Bills cut Thad Lewis. Sorry.
I know.
The Bills cut Jeff Toole. Yeah, it's not good for Toole Time fans from coast to coast. And the Bills signed Kyle Orton. $3 million signing bonus, $2.5 million base in 2014, $5.4 million base in 2015. That's a lot of money to give a backup quarterback. I remember thinking, okay, well, here's the guy when and if EJ falters.
More like when, and it kind of came out of nowhere. I remember being a little surprised that Orton was going to be the guy, but it was another, veteran backup quarterback. I don't think I really looked at him too much different than Kevin Cobb the year before, even though maybe Orton probably would have been a little better at the job. I don't know if it even matters distinguishing the two, but that was my initial reaction.
Well, it was interesting because you mentioned the money, and that, sends alarm bells off in your head because, I don't know, maybe it was a week earlier, 2 weeks earlier, they brought in Jordan Palmer. And I thought, that's different.
Didn't think we were going to talk about him in a busy year like this, but okay.
I was like, that's different. That's a guy that can bring EJ along, almost be like an extra quarterback coach on the bench because that's basically what Jordan Palmer has become. But Kyle Orton came in and it was like, maybe they don't have the faith in EJ that, we thought they did. And, Doug Marrone played nice and Kyle Orton played nice, said he was there to be a backup, but it was obvious to anybody who watched camp, that EJ wasn't very good, but that the guys behind him were even worse. Yes. And so they needed that stability, I guess, if you could call Kyle Orton that. And I guess they got it.
Yeah, the neckbeard rides again. Trouble in Paradise continues on Friday, September 5th, 2 days before the start of the season. Jason Lockenfora, who is, maybe Bon Jovi's enemy number one. Lockenfora is on the list. Yes. He's up there in terms of Bills fans, but he gets things. For better or worse, and there have been instances where he's been incorrect or inaccurate, but this is a story that kind of had been percolating, and we knew that there had been issues in the 2013 season. Well, Lockenfora reports of a shouting match between Marrone and front office members on a practice field in view of players. Sources then say, and this is a part that I don't know if it's true or not, but I just want to believe that it's true. Marrone refers to himself as Saint Doug. And this was a nickname that stuck with him to this day, really, the St. Doug nickname. And he calls himself that because it takes 2 miracles to be canonized. He did one at Syracuse, and he's in the process of doing one in Buffalo. That is just amazing.
And Doug Marrone was amazing right from the start. Really, when it came to dealing with the media and things he said and things that he thought about himself, always kind of blew you away. And this was, I don't remember much about this one. It seemed like so many other things going on, and this was kind of like Story J. But, boy, it was just another thing that was part of the Marrone era.
I remember the yelling match.
You were there for it?
It was within view of reporters at the time. Not a lot of reporters because it was just another day at practice. They had already returned to Orchard Park. It was, sort of that late training camp where it's not really training camp, but it still is. And I remember the yelling match and thinking, what's going on? And we asked Doug about it afterwards. He sort of shut it down, no big deal. And that's when, Bill's PR was getting all upset that we were tweeting about it because it was pretty.
Didn't someone have a piece of video?
It was in plain view. I don't know if anybody got video. Somebody
not the actual shouting match.
Brodak might have got a photo or whatever it was. And Bill's PR was not happy. And then Doug shut it down. But then the report, that probably piqued Jason Lockenfora's interest and said, what was going on there? And, he got some of the details, and then Doug Marrone laughed it off. He's saying, I've never called myself Saint Doug. You guys know me. And I'm like, well.
We do know you. This is why we believe it. And just to the fact that this comes right on the eve of the season. And we've seen this even up into 2016 where, like, either it be the morning of a game or the Friday, in this case, before a game, a bombshell is dropped about the inner workings of the Bills, whether it be the coaching staff or the front office. And I'm sure there's an example before this, but this was an example that really stood out to me of like, why is this coming on September 5th? And I know maybe that's just because that's where the shouting match took place, but that like, this seems too good, like too much of a coincidence that like someone is leaking or just, giving out this information as a way to undercut someone else in the Buffalo Bills organization.
Well, I remember correctly. Wasn't that about Kyle Orton? Wasn't this Marrone wanted Orton and management did not, or vice versa, or something like that?
I don't know that the subject of the meeting ever became. I think it had to do with roster cuts. Somebody got cut that, whatever it was. It was Doug Marrone, Jim Monis, Doug Whaley, and Russ Brandon were involved in the shouting match. So you don't have to, connect too many dots to figure out who was talking. It was probably one of those four guys. And it was very interesting because there were a lot of, there was a lot of clashing between Doug Marrone and Doug Whaley and his staff. And I think that was probably the most public display, and they tried to hide it more as things went on. But as people will, we'll get to later, it played a big role in Doug Marrone's eventual departure.
And then there's also, there also have been reports earlier in 2014 of, divisions and conflicts coming up between like the old guys and the new guys, the guys that were there under Ralph that had been there since the 80s, whether it be Berchtold, and we know of the Berchtold-Marrone friction that had been prevalent throughout 2013. Jim Orverdorf and Littman and guys in the organization that had been there for 20, 30 years. And so to me, it just felt like, man, the Bills, it seems like everybody's just kind of stabbing each other in the back. And this is a team that hasn't made the playoffs since the 90s. Like, this is a team that's still in disarray. Not only the fact that we don't know who owns the team, but the people that are there, they can't get their ducks in a row.
This isn't too far off the heels of the Doug Whaley, Doug Marrone, Tim Graham story in a bar about how the old school versus new school interpretations of how the Bills should be run. So, yeah. I mean, the leaks were just, it was a Titanic in that place.
Yeah. So the start of the season, November 7th in Chicago, a sunny day at Soldier Field.
September 7th, that's okay.
What did I say?
November.
Oh, whatever. You know what I meant. Week 1, September 7th. Thank you, Thad.
You're welcome.
E.J. Manuel runs in for a touchdown. It's a nice little finger roll celebration in the end zone. Corey Graham and Kyle Williams, that's right, Kyle Williams pick off Jay Cutler. Mario Williams and Brandon Spikes, they sack Cutler. Game goes to overtime. Fred Jackson has one of his more memorable runs as he shoves Chris Conte into another time zone as Dan Carpenter kicks a game-winning field goal in overtime. Bills win week 1, 23-20, and I remember thinking, EJ wasn't good, but the Bills defense, which was good in 2013, looks legit here at the start of 14.
It's easy to get down and do all that stuff, and here we go, but I didn't see any of that from this team. This team was like, hey, we're going to get this thing done. We're going to go out and stop them. We're going to get the ball back, and we're going to score.
We have a lot of guys on this offense that believe in everything that we do, and we knew we had an opportunity to go win the game. Defense did their part, got them to punt the ball, and it was on us to go win, and we were able to do so.
A lot of people thought the Bears would be pretty good in 2014, so that was seen as a really good win. That was a game that I think most Bills fans went into thinking there's probably not a reasonable chance Buffalo to win it, and then to pull it out. It was a great feeling, and I remember Anthony Dixon coming off the field, the first of the great Anthony Dixon post-game rants about you better watch out for Buffalo.
Hey, man, it felt good, baby. We're going to shock the world. They doubting us. They sleeping on us. They're going to have nightmares.
But as it turned out, the Bears weren't nearly as good as anybody thought, and looking back on that win, it wasn't anywhere as good as anybody thought either.
There was Fred's stiff arm, there was EJ's finger roll, but what you didn't mention was when EJ shushed the crowd. That's the screenshot that I think will live forever when he got into the end zone, and he was feeling pretty confident after that. And like you said, he wasn't very good.
No.
But a road win against the Bears, who looked like a pretty good team, that defense looked for real. All of a sudden I thought, wait a second, everything I watched in training camp, this team looked terrible.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not so terrible. But the rest of the season.
We know what happens. Yeah, Manuel, 16 of 22 for 173 yards in a week 1 win.
A true, team victory in every sense of the word today. I'm just so proud to be a part of this team, to be one of the team leaders, to be the quarterback of this team. And, I think we showed a lot of resiliency.
It seems like nothing is fazing him this year. He's taking his whole team, not just his offense, he's taking his whole team, and we're all believing in him. now we're just playing. There's no more thinking. We're just going out there and playing football.
Before we get to week 2, Monday, September 8th, the final bids are submitted. Pagula, Trump, and the Bon Jovi Toronto group have submitted bids for the Buffalo Bills, and Kelly Pagula tweets out 16 exclamation points. This is really when you see people like combing through everybody loosely associated with whatever organization or group or player, and to see the daughter of Terry Pagula tweet out 16 exclamation points and then follow the Bills account. Man, just the jump to conclusions, Matt, was just in everyone's living rooms. They were like, oh, it's going to the Pagulas. That's what's happening. And then the following morning, September 9th, at 9:37 a.m., Tim Graham tweets, an agreement has been reached between the Buffalo Bills and Terry Pagula, and that just set off a whole wave of quite a Tuesday in early September.
It was party time,
It sure was.
It was also expected, so it wasn't out of nowhere. This wasn't like the Bills scoring a touchdown pass in the last play of the game. Wow, I can't believe that happened. It was kind of the way things had been going, but it didn't make it any less of a relief or it was kind of like VBB Day, if there's such a thing, and everybody was happy. And even Terry Pagula in his press conference referred to a caller on WGR in Buffalo, the guy from from Dominican Republic, I think it was.
Something like that.
Yeah, who just cried about how the Bills were going to stay in Buffalo. That's how important it was.
Bills fans were living on a prayer, and that prayer came true. John Bon Jovi is not going to buy the team, but John's here to tell us who is.
Yeah, this is a best-case scenario for the fans and really, Kev, the region, Buffalo, Rochester for sure. The Buffalo Bills confirming this afternoon that indeed Terry Pagula and his wife, Fairport native Kim Pagula, have won the bid to purchase the franchise that Ralph Wilson founded back in 1959. They have been the front runners since mid-June. All that awaits is official approval from the league's owners. That's expected to happen in 3 weeks at the owners' meetings in New York. It's believed the Pagulas paid an NFL record price for the team, about $1.4 billion. What this means, Kev, is long-term stability for the franchise in Western New York. In a statement issued today, Pagula said, our interest in owning the Bills has everything to do with the people of Western New York and our passion for football.
Fans had a reason to feel safe that the team would stay, but they didn't. You could tell they didn't
Yes,
totally
that's what it
feel
was.
it. They still had that in the back of their mind, like this isn't going to go our way.
Yeah.
Some secret bidder will swoop in and take them off to some city.
And just hearing all those people call into WGR, some of them are crying and sharing all these stories. It's like, man, people had a lot of built-up fear.
Yeah.
That if they weren't expressing it publicly, they clearly had it, and they're relieved as anything that it's Terry Pagula, because obviously, it's very obvious that the team was staying, and that first home game after that was, a special atmosphere. People were really, really excited to have the team, and I think they showed it in that game.
2:45 p.m. that same day on Tuesday, September 9th, the Bills officially announced an agreement of the sale of the team to the Pagula family. Reports from Lauren Brill from IVB at the time for $1.4 billion, the most for an NFL team ever at that point. An agreement needs league approval, but that's just going to be rubber stamped because, as we've said, Pagula has clearly got everything in line and checks all the boxes for an NFL owner.
Really kind of some relief there, some excitement to know that, 10, 12, 15 years from now, I don't have to tell my kids what a kind of a special place this was. I can actually bring them and show them, rather than describe it to them. So, I think it was a great day for everybody that's involved in this community and this organization.
We want to be in Buffalo. We want to be here in Western New York. There's a tremendous fan base here, and we're happy for those guys. To have it all put to rest and, know that the team is going to be here, that's something that, everybody in this locker room is happy about.
I was lucky enough to know Mr. Wilson, to have a relationship with Mr. Wilson, understand that what he meant to, not only our franchise, but, the NFL as a whole. To have a relationship with him and now be here for the changing of the guard, it's, I have a unique perspective. You try to, tell guys about it, how special it is, but if they haven't learned to this point, they'll learn enough on Sunday to know that this is a special place.
Week 2, September 14th against the Miami Dolphins. Probably the best atmosphere I've ever seen at a Bills game, maybe rivaled by the Packers game that comes later on in this season. But Jim Kelly is honored. Ralph Wilson has his name put up in gold in the Wall of Fame. And Kelly just stands there. He doesn't even have to say anything. And just the crowd, just an ocean of praise and cheers and just an ovation that again, the hairs stick up on the back of your neck. And I was on the field for that game, and just to see that sigh of relief. Our hero is here. He's healthy. Who knows if he's out of the woods, but he's here, and that meant so much after where he was just a few months ago. And now the Bills are staying here in Western New York. And Matt, just your first home game covering the Bills is, probably one of the biggest celebrations the Bills have had since a playoff game.
Yeah, I remember thinking, is this what it's like every Sunday? And it's not too far off, but that was, a height that maybe hasn't been reached since, like you mentioned. But you think Bills, Dolphins, September, not much to it. But it seems every year the home opener has that feel. But it was extra special that year with everything that was going on. I remember I did a lap around, the parking lots, as I would always do in college, just to kind of take the temperature of the air and talk to people. And you could just feel how excited people were that they get to watch football not only that Sunday, but for many Sundays to come because of Terry Pegula. And there was just a genuine appreciation of that, which you don't get every Sunday when you're walking around an NFL stadium. And it was pretty special, pretty unique to see. It felt, honestly, like I'd never left college. It felt a lot like a college atmosphere with the tailgates and everything else. So pretty cool to watch it unfold.
No way the Bills were losing.
Nope.
They were going to be 2-0.
Yeah, and I remember, John Kutchko and I, we were at this game, and the drive in, you get off the highway, and people have signs up in front of their yards, and I just remember seeing a big one that just said, thank you Terry, and Pagulaville, and we love you Jim, and you felt that relief that was so prevalent throughout all of Western New York and for Bills fans everywhere. It was really cool. The following week, the Bills are home again against the San Diego Chargers. It doesn't go well.
Well, an expected letdown, kind of, sort of. And as we have pointed out, their quarterback isn't really as good as 2-0.
Yeah.
And the other quarterback is really, really good. But it was a game that the thing that I remember thinking about that game being on the field is that the Chargers are winning this game ugly. It's like 22-10 or 3 at one point. And even with Phillip Rivers, even with an offense that can threaten most any defense in the league, they were playing it, to me, to punt, because they had no fear that E.J. Manuel was going to score enough points to threaten them in the game, even in E.J. Manuel's own stadium. So the whole third and fourth quarter felt like San Diego is just taking knees, running the ball. They're telling the Bills, go ahead. If your quarterback can score 2 touchdowns on us, have at it, because we don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I want to say Danny Woodhead blew out his knee in that game. And they got the tight end involved, and that was when that started to become a trend, that the Bills' defense had some cracks. And as good as that defense was, it was really good, but Phillip Rivers exposed them a little bit on that day, and we lost Danny Woodhead for the year, which was very sad, but I think that was when the defense, you started to see that, like you mentioned, we knew the quarterback wasn't good enough. We knew the offense wasn't going to hold up its end of the bargain, and we started to see that early, the pressure starting to really close in on the defense, and you realize they're not going to be able to shut out everybody. They're not going to be able to bring it every week, and that's when you started to think, okay, this team, something needs to break their way, otherwise it's going to be hard for that defense to carry them all the way.
I'm disappointed we lost the game. Make no mistake about it. But it's a long season, and we got to keep fighting and keep getting better. I mean, they're a playoff team. They got some good players on that team, and we made some mistakes.
We didn't execute as an offense. We had some 3 and outs, didn't convert on third down like we needed to. You just look at it as that. It's week 3. You don't panic. Just like in weeks 1 and 2, you don't get too high.
With every loss, there's always something to learn from. So you can't look at it and all of a sudden start dwelling on it. You got to move on. This is the NFL, so other teams are very good too, and I think we're still a good team. So it's all about moving forward to next week and being prepared for those guys.
Well, something definitely did not break for them in the following week. It broke for the other team, for the Houston Texans, in a big way. Bills led 10-7 at halftime, and I remember this game. You were in Houston.
Yes.
I was here in Rochester, and I happened to be in the building. At halftime, I knew the Bills were up 10-7, and that Houston was going to get the ball to start the second half. And so I was like, ooh, I don't know when I'm going to be able to grab a bite to eat. So I made a Wegmans run. And if you know where News 8 is, the East Ave Wegmans in Rochester is like 2 minutes from here. I go over to Wegmans, grab a bite to eat, get back in the car on my way back to News 8, and John Murphy sounds all dejected on the broadcast. And I go like, oh, Houston must have scored. And then J.J. Watt scores a touchdown, an 80-yard pick six. I'm like, wait a minute, what the hell's going on out here? Well, the Bills had picked off Ryan Fitzpatrick to start the second half, and the first play from scrimmage is an 80-yard touchdown the other way from J.J. Watt. And I watched it back later and went, oh my God, he just delivered the ball like a child to an expectant mother or something in a hospital, and away goes J.J. Watt.
On the field, as the Bills were in this situation, the thought that occurred to me was the 99-yarder the Chiefs had pulled on them last year.
Yep.
I'm thinking, there's no way this will happen again. That thought actually did pop into my head within 60 seconds of J.J. Watt running it back 80 yards the other way. I couldn't believe it. Also, by the way, the worst touchdown I've ever shot, just because I was not in a good spot.
Of course.
I was behind everybody. I was so mad. It was like, I think J.J. Watt's got the ball. I can't see him. And then he went over. It was the highlight of the game. And here you go, John. This is the best I got for you.
JJ does a great job. We talked about it last week. As far as him being able to get his hands up, and block down balls and try to throw hot to Fred there. And he just made an awesome play. Hats off to him. He made a great play on it.
And we got to get that throw over his head. We got to get that throw over it. And, he made a play, and one of the keys was to make sure that, he wasn't going to, make that big disruptive play, prior to the game, and he did.
What a crazy display of athleticism from J.J. Watt. I mean, the pick was fairly easy. E.J. helped him out, gave him a pretty big assist on that. But he outran everybody, and nobody was catching him. And I was like, you got the bird's eye view in the press box, and you're like, oh my God, that is a large man running very fast. And that game was just a series of EJ trying to find ways to lose. And that game meant a lot to Fitzpatrick. He was all fired up before and after the game, getting a shot at Buffalo. And he didn't do all that much to help himself either. But EJ was just constantly shooting the Bills in the foot in that game.
Robert Woods, I remember a couple of times, had visible, frustrated reactions on the field, which may have contributed, I think, to what happened the following Monday.
Yeah, so, and in that game against the Houston Texans, E.J. Manuel throws an 80-yard touchdown to Mike Williams, a player, just because everything happens in 2014, we won't really spend a whole lot of time with, but I was like, wow, okay, Mike Williams, that was impressive, but then E.J. throws a brutal pick late in the game to ice it for Houston. Manuel throws the ball 44 times. That's not going to win you football games. He did have 2 touchdowns, but he also had 2 interceptions as well. Texans win 23-17, so the Bills drop to 2-2. Post-game, Doug Marrone is asked, are you going to yank the cord out from EJ? No, not at all. I am not considering Kyle Orton at all to be the starting quarterback. The next day, Monday, September 29th, Doug Marrone benches EJ Manuel for Kyle Orton. Oops.
Coach told me I was going to be the starter. I said I appreciate it, and go out and give everything I got to get you a win. We've got the full gamut of plays in, and I feel comfortable. I've felt comfortable for the last 2 or 3 weeks, so I think I feel comfortable with everything in the playbook.
I did what I thought, from watching what I've seen, my heart and my mind, what I thought was the best thing for our team to win. And really that's how the decision was made for me. But I think it's the same thing like I said before. All the blame's not on, the one position. We all have to increase what we're doing to put us in a better situation to win.
Everything can look great in practice, but you never know what's going to take place in the game. And, I feel like he's ready. He's getting prepared. He's demanding us of what he wants out of routes, and you need to be there. So I just can't wait to actually get in the game with him.
Kyle Orton is the 14th starting quarterback since Jim Kelly. And you were on your way back from Houston. You both were back on your way back from Houston. To land in Western New York and see, Bills have a new quarterback.
Not completely stunned. Like I said, this was more than just EJ performing poorly. I always felt, I don't want to say always felt like, but at that point I felt like the receiver room was starting to lose it with him. They had no interest of wanting to prop him up anymore. Sammy's separate, the veteran guys. And Robert Woods, I can't remember a receiver showing more frustration with his own quarterback in a game than Woods showed in that game. And Woods was fairly young at the time himself.
He was the second year, too.
Exactly. So it was definitely a huge red flag for, young quarterback or otherwise. You just could not continue on in this way.
Yeah, I remember getting back a couple hours later, scrambling over to get to One Bills Drive as Marrone, is essentially making this announcement. And it was surprising, but not totally unexpected. We were talking before, that's a game that I'm never going to forget, that Houston game. It just will stick with me. And I remember seeing EJ in the locker room after the game. He was the last one out of the locker room. And that was never the case with EJ. He was always quick to get his suit on, go to the podium, and handle his media responsibilities. He was beat up. He was dejected. And he just wasn't himself. And I think there was a fear with Doug Marrone and some of his staff that if they didn't pull the plug on him, they thought they had a chance to save him by benching him. And, they thought if they kept playing him throughout that year, he was done. That was it. He was going to be totally lost. It turns out he was pretty much lost anyways, but they thought they could save him by pulling the plug, and they thought, hey, maybe we can save the season, because they weren't stupid. They saw what they had on the defensive side of the ball, and they saw that EJ was killing them in a lot of those games, even though they were 2-2. The season could go either way at that point, and I think they thought they could save it. They almost did.
Yeah, and I wonder with EJ, because he has to start week 1 of his rookie season, he never had really a training period, and we knew he was a flawed quarterback coming out of Florida State. Did you guys ever get a sense that, could there have been a circumstance where EJ succeeded?
Maybe Seattle or Pittsburgh. Seattle, where you had a stacked defense to where you didn't need the quarterback as much. I think more so, though, Pittsburgh would have been a better chance just because of the organizational structure. But at the end of the day, I don't think E.J. Manuel was anywhere close to a quality quarterback, even less so than I think people thought at the draft. I mean, he couldn't do anything. He wasn't accurate. He couldn't read defenses. He couldn't run a huddle. He couldn't do anything as a quarterback.
Yeah, I just don't know that there's a situation where he would have succeeded. I think a lot of times quarterbacks and whether they're successful does depend on where they land and what they're surrounded with. I think you have the rare quarterbacks who can succeed anywhere, and you have the all too common quarterbacks who are going to fail no matter where they go. Mm-hmm. And E.J. Manuel is one of those guys. He reminded me a lot of Blaine Gabbert, another one of those guys who probably would have stunk wherever he went. E.J. was a good guy. I think he was a guy that teammates enjoyed playing for. Ultimately, he wasn't all that quick. He had an okay arm, but it wasn't great, a slow release, and he was just horribly inaccurate. And he never really fixed any of those issues or got better, and I think that's what ultimately doomed him. As hard as he was trying and as much work as he put in, the progress never showed up on the field, as many opportunities as he got, and ultimately I don't think it would have mattered. Obviously Buffalo wasn't a good spot for him. I'm not sure that there was a good one.
Yeah, first round pick benched before week 5 of his second NFL season, and in that week 5, Kyle Orton saves the day for the Buffalo Bills in Detroit, a game that, man, it seems like every single one of these games at the start of the 2014 season has something crazy goes on. Kyle Orton, showing the rust, throws a 41-yard pick six to Rashawn Mathis in the second quarter. He ran right by me. Looked like he was smiling at me. Dan Carpenter in the third quarter, 1 of 2 on field goal attempts, and says he was hit with a laser pointer on the second field goal attempt. And I remember shooting this because I was covering this game in Detroit, and he, as soon as he misses his second field goal, he runs over to the officials and is pointing to his eyes. And I was just I didn't know what, you can kind of read lips and read body gestures. I didn't know what he was talking about. And Marrone is probably a good 40 yards away from me, and he runs out in the field and he starts doing this. I'm like, what is this? And it was only until after the game when Marrone explains that Dan Carpenter and Kyle Orton too was saying that they were getting hit with laser pointers right as plays were beginning. And, I go back and I look through my video, and sure enough, there's a shot of Kyle Orton under center, and a green light flashes in front of his face. And Dan Carpenter gets hit with one right as the ball's about to be snapped in a field goal attempt. And, I've watched a lot of football in my life. You guys have as well. I've never seen that.
No, that was brand new. The best part about it was, so you tweeted out and the little still frame or the slow video of the laser pointer, and then it becomes an all points bulletin in Detroit to locate this guy who does actually get picked up and arrested, and he's never going to go to Lions games ever again.
Yeah, the funny thing was Dan Carpenter did not kick well, and he had a laser pointer in his eyes, but he was not the worst kicker on the field.
By far.
He was not the worst kicker on the field, because Alex Henry, in his final game in the NFL, didn't have a long career. 0 for 3 on field goal attempts. Missed his third field goal with 26 seconds left that could have won the game for the Detroit Lions, but instead created an opportunity for Kyle Orton to lead the Bills down the field in less than 30 seconds. Orton to Watkins for 20 yards, then Carpenter bangs a 58-yarder with 9 seconds left. Jim Schwartz carried off the field by the Bills defense as the Bills win 17-13 to go above 500 at 3-2. That was just a bananas finish in Detroit.
And it was one of those games that I looked at with a very jaundiced eye. All right, so see, Kyle Orton threw a pick six, and the other team's field goal kicker missed three, 4 kicks, whatever it was.
3.
I'm starting quarterback. You got to got to lead the offense. You got to make the plays when you're called to make them. And I was excited for the chance to do that. I think we've got a young offense that has a lot of room to grow, has a lot of room to become an explosive offense. But it won't happen overnight.
The only thing that I think you took out of that game and thought, wow, Sammy Watkins had a couple of really nice catches late in that game. But beyond that, okay, they're 3-2, but this is the same, Mirage 3-2 that started them 2-0.
I believe Kyle Orton was rocking the mustache at the time.
Sure was, and a big lip too.
That was probably the biggest takeaway.
That's right.
You're like, hey, maybe this is the guy. Maybe he can settle the ship. But also, I think what will stick in my mind about that game is Jim Schwartz getting carried off the field.
Mm-hmm.
That was hilarious.
A defensive coordinator.
Later that week, I was, talking to Jim one-on-one, and I brought it up. I was like, you got carried off the field.
The elephant in the room, you got to ask him.
I waited until the end, I peppered him with some other, football stuff, and then said, so about getting carried off the field. And he's like, yeah, I'm not talking about that. I was like, all right. He was a little embarrassed, but that game meant something to him.
Sure did.
And he was fired up. And that was an oddly entertaining game, as the Bills tend to play. So these weird games that are entertaining and memorable, but they are just bad football games. That was one of them.
Yeah, they're totally irrelevant in the galaxy. They just mean nothing to anybody, and yet here we are years later, distinctly remembering specific details. And it is kind of ironic that this game is played in Detroit. The Bills are playing the Lions because Ralph Wilson, born and raised outside the Motor City, Detroit was where he lived pretty much his entire life. So the Bills play there in the final game of the Wilson era. Mary Wilson and the Bill owns and the trust are owning the team at the time. Well, 3 days later, on Wednesday, October 8th, the league unanimously approves sale of the Bills to the Pegula family.
Kim and I are honored that the NFL owners have approved us as the new owners of the Buffalo Bills. And we'd like to thank the owners for their support. If you asked me 10 years ago if I was going to own the Sabres and the Bills, I would have called you a liar. I got a hell of a deal. I own the team.
Probably the most gratifying moment of my career, to know that the Buffalo Bills are in their rightful place in Buffalo. It obviously cements, like I said, Mr. Wilson's legacy, and now we can create a family's new legacy, and it's an honor to be a part of it.
And then Friday, October 10th, the Bills introduced the Pegulas as new owners, and the Bills are here to stay.
Again, as we've talked about it, we've had so much getting ready for this point and enjoying it. It was, I'll put it this way, I don't know if you'll get this analogy. You watch Apollo 13, right? Tom Hanks and all that stuff. So when the capsule is seen and we know he's going to live, everyone's like, yeah! That was September 9th. Later in the movie, when Tom Hanks is delivered to the aircraft carrier and gets out, and you can see him actually in body, and they cut to a scene of his family, and they're kind of like, yay! It's down a level, but still happy. That's what this was. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
It was a historic day here in Orchard Park. A new era is underway. Terry Pegula introduced as the new owner of the Buffalo Bills, just the second owner, of course, in franchise history. The transaction, the sale of the team, became official yesterday afternoon when all the paperwork was complete, $1.4 billion worth. He arrived at the stadium about 2 p.m. today, 2 hours ahead of the news conference, which was at 4. He was quite emotional throughout.
We all just bought a team. Our team, the Buffalo Bills. The fear the fans had was an innate fear we had, What's up with the Bills, Do we want this team to leave town? And the answer was obviously no. It's a great franchise, and it's, I didn't know it at the time, the only original AFL team to still be named by its original city for all those years. So it went back probably after we bought the Sabres and accelerated with time.
And Terry Pegula acknowledged that he never met Ralph Wilson, never talked to him, but he had a deep respect for what Wilson built here in Buffalo and on One Bills Drive in Orchard Park. Terry said, of course, he'll be on the field before the game, Sunday's game, in the stadium behind me that bears Ralph Wilson's name. It'll be a celebration, a frenzy of epic scale here in Orchard Park. Reporting live from One Bills Drive, I'm John Kutchko. Ashley, back to you.
I would argue that the home game that week rivaled the home game in week two against the Dolphins.
How much do you think was Patriots being in town, though?
That played into it in a big way, and the team was in contention. And it seems like every year since I've been here, that's been the measuring stick. Is like, all right, this team looks pretty good, and then they play against the Patriots, and that's when you find out just how far away they are in a lot of cases. But that atmosphere, because the Pegulas were going to be introduced to the crowd, it rivaled that week 2 game against the Dolphins for sure.
Yeah, and just sort of a note about the Bills and their structure. Russ Brandon is no longer the CEO. That obviously goes to the Bills, but Brandon remains, or to the Pegulas, but Brandon remains the president. And to me, I still think the Miami game has a bigger ovation because, of course, the Bills win that game against Miami as opposed to the one against New England. But I remember when C.J. Spiller early in the second half of that game against the Dolphins has a 103-yard kickoff return. And when the crowd recognizes that he has daylight, that pop, I think, is now I wasn't here for the Super Bowl years. I wasn't here for the playoff years that followed, but that pop from the crowd is the loudest I've heard the Ralph. And maybe, I don't know that I can think of another example that topped it in the time I've covered the team, starting really with 2012.
I never had any good games that year. I had the Vikings game, which wasn't bad, but it wasn't the same. I didn't have either of these two momentous, changing of the guard, passing of the torch kind of games.
Yeah, that one, the game wasn't very loud.
No.
It was the pregame atmosphere and the build-up to the game, and the only thing I can think of that probably rivaled that Dolphins game, but again, it didn't last long, was the Patriots game the following year, would have been 2015, when the Bills looked pretty good. They had beaten the Colts.
Yeah.
And it was like, we're going to break the noise record. And I was like,
oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Oh, yeah.
Which we'll get to and all
Didn't
that.
Look good.
But,
yeah, I forgot about that.
Point being, like, that was another one that it was really loud, and then the Bills gave them no reason to sustain it. The cool part about the Dolphins game was, like you said, there's no way they're losing that game. I never thought that because they're the Bills and they have E.J. Manuel as their quarterback. They could easily lose that game, but they didn't. And I think that's what made that such a special atmosphere. It was like, wait a second, things are going right for this team. They're 2-0. They've got an owner that's going to keep the team in Buffalo. And I think that's what made that one just a notch above.
Yeah, the Pegulas are introduced before their Week 6 game against the Patriots. They're honored pregame. They do the big card thing where the thousands of people hold up the one Buffalo sign. And Marrone's play calling gets called into question in this one because with 14 seconds left in the first half from their own 30, he runs a play to C.J. Spiller, who then fumbles the ball. That allows for a Gostkowski field goal with no time left as the Bills then go into the half trailing. Pats get the ball coming out of halftime. Brady marches them right down the field. So there's 10 points without the Bills touching the ball.
The Brandon LaFell game, right? I believe the second half he just tore him apart.
Something like that.
Yeah. That's what I remember. But I didn't hate the play call too much. I mean, I hated the fact that C.J. Spiller put it on the ground, but it was New England. They weren't winning the game. You could point to, this was where it went bad. It wasn't C.J. Spiller. It was just going to be somebody else.
Or Tom Brady throwing for 361 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Right.
That was a Gronk game as well. Yep. He played well. Brady dominated. And, again, it was one of those weeks where you said, the defense can't do it every week. And they can't do it against Philip Rivers, Tom Brady, week after week. They could do it against, when everything breaks their way in Detroit. But when you're playing against the Patriots, they weren't up to it.
Well, if there's anybody in here that points a finger other than at themselves, they need to get the hell out of here. So, the only person that any of us have a person to point at, they need to turn around and point at themselves and ask what they can do better. We all can do things better, but you start pointing fingers, that's a big problem if you start doing that.
Pats win 37-22. Brady now 23-2 all time against the Bills. Week 7. October 19th, Minnesota Vikings are in town. Thad, you were at this game, and Kyle Orton, the triumphant hero once again, this time leads another fourth quarter comeback. A 28-yard pass to Chris Hogan gets him down to the 2, and then with 1 second left, a touchdown to Sammy Watkins to win the game.
Can't leave out 4th and 20 to Scott Chandler, though. Same drive. But my favorite part of this game is that going back with this on film, on the All-22, you can actually see, because in between each play on All-22, they show the scoreboard. And there's a spot with about a minute and a half to go before the 4th and 20. There are thousands of people making a beeline to the exits. For that little 5 seconds where they show the scoreboard just to tell you what down it is, everybody's leaving. And I've watched it 4 or 5 times, more than I watched any of the plays in that game. I'm like, you guys all missed the finish.
That was a great catch by Sammy Watkins.
Both and Hogan too.
And Hogan too. And that's when I say joke about, maybe Kyle Orton's the guy, but it wasn't so much that maybe he's the guy. It was just that here's the difference. You're in a close game and you have a shot, which is more than a lot of teams can say, and you got to give Kyle Orton some credit for that, because he had a way of pulling out these games at the end. He knew who to go to with the ball, and he knew to try to get the ball to Sammy Watkins, and that was a really, really great catch. And again, another moment where the Ralph got pretty loud, and it looked like the Bills might have a shot to hang in contention for a while.
He put us in the greatest situations. He know how to help us out on the field, put us in different areas, and that's what we need, a veteran quarterback. And I think we played it as a group today. Everybody made plays.
We're a good offense, and when everybody does their job, we go down and score points. It's pretty much that simple. It's been like that for the last 3 weeks. When we do our job and execute the plays, execute our responsibility.
Well, like you said too, that was, on the field, I remember thinking the only thing you're doing here is going to Sammy Watkins. And it's 3-4 seconds ago.
The Vikings probably thought the same thing. And they still made the play.
Exactly. That was the thing. Not only did they make the play, it was the right choice. It was the sensible choice. It was well executed. Sammy, as a rookie in a big spot, got as open as easily as can be, even in a situation where you think like the Vikings should be pushing every kind of coverage his way. It didn't matter. The Bills did the right thing, executed it. Their star made it look easy. It was, that one play was what the Bills should have been about most of that season.
And that's probably what they had in mind when they traded a future first-round pick to get Sammy Watkins. Plays like that, unfortunately, they've been few and far between, but that was one where you thought maybe they have something here.
The Bills' Week 7 win puts them at 4-3 on the season, but the win does come at a cost as Fred Jackson injures his groin and C.J. Spiller breaks his collarbone and is basically done for the season. He plays in 2 more games after this one. Week 8, the Bills go on the road to face the New York Jets. Geno Smith throws 3 picks in the first quarter, gets benched. Rex trying trick plays. He's T.J. Graham hiding in the end zone on a kickoff return.
That's right.
Fooled nobody. Watkins gets tripped up from behind as he's trying to celebrate before he runs into the end zone.
I was shocked. I looked at the jumbotron. I thought I had at least 3 or 4 yards on him. I would have been devastated if we wouldn't have scored off that drive. It would have been a totally different game.
There were people on that sideline, meaning his teammates, that were upset. We're playing our butts off, and, we don't have time for stuff like that. And those are the things we have to work on, winning and growing up.
Luckily, it didn't come back to bite us. We were still able to make plays and win the football game, but I doubt he'll do that again. And, I think we all expect him to play for a long, long time. Maybe that's what he needed for his career going forward.
Talk about just stupid moments from the season. Mike Vick sacked 4 times. Kyle has 2 sacks. Bills win 43-23 to go into the bye 5-3. All right. Not too bad. I mean, Thad being in the Meadowlands and
Jets were a mess.
Yep.
The Rexes last year, we'd see them again on this Bills schedule in a few weeks. And Buffalo just, took them to the woodshed, which is what they should have done in that spot.
Which was, again, one of those moments where you say, all right, this team isn't bad because that team is bad. And they took took care of business, right? It's something that we didn't really see them do a lot in the years after Marrone left. Bad team just beat up on them, and they were able to do that against the Jets. And that one got ugly in a hurry. It was
the whole second
Geno
half
was a mess. Geno, who's buddies with EJ, drafted the same year. He looked bad. You knew it was going to be bad when Mike Vick got thrown into the game. It was ugly, and the Bills were, as you mentioned, banged up, and yet they just pounded them.
We've got an incredible defense, one of the best in the league, and it obviously makes everybody's job easier when they're putting you in that type of field position.
I really like the way this team responds. It's different than teams we've had in the past when they've had adversity come up. Played hard, but didn't use it as I guess maybe a catalyst to go on and win a football game. In the past when bad things have happened, we've used it as a crutch, and if that wouldn't have happened, we would have won the game. And, guys just keep battling.
Well, the Bills come out of the bye week taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. Bills led 10-3 at halftime, kind of similar to the Chiefs game the year prior. But there is no 100-yard pick six in this game. Oh, no, because as the Bills march into Kansas City territory, Bryce Brown does the failure for them as he fumbles at the 5. Scott Chandler can't recover it in the end zone, falls out of the end zone for a touchback. Goes to Kansas City. Bills led 13-3 in the fourth quarter of that game. Jamal Charles rips off a 39-yard touchdown on 4th and 1. Bills forced a 3-and-out and then on the next Chiefs possession, Leotis McKelvin fumbles a punt return. You have 3 moments that happen in the second half of this game against the Chiefs that maybe if one of them goes the Bills' way, they win this game. They probably should have won this game. They don't. Chiefs win 17-13. And Leotis McKelvin afterward has the point-blank period press conference at his locker.
As an athlete, as a player, as an athlete, you should know. I mean, as a reporter, you should, if you up on your any kind of things you got going on, whatnot, this is my job. It's my job. I take this take the heart, take it very kindly, So if I fumble the ball, I feel I put it on myself. Put it on myself, and I try to come back. Try to put us in a great field position. Try to win the game. There's opportunities that comes for you. You got to take the opportunities and go forward.
And you know what? You did that on the next somebody or.
And most definitely, you feel like you're good enough and you do this and score every time you get the ball. I mean, you run like that. I just try to do it whatever I got to do. Keep my team into the game. Costly. I fumbled the ball. That hurt us. But we still also had a chance to go back and still win the game. So it happens in the game, but you still got to overcome them.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Fumble ball came out from my knee hit the ground. I mean, they got the ball. You're supposed to go out there, stop it no matter what the situation may be. It's just like the offense going out there, they have a turnover. They got to go out there, get the ball back, either get a 3-and-9 in that situation right there. We didn't. They scored, so we got to live on, move on, go on to the next play.
How do you flip?
It's a loss any given Sunday. We just got to step it up next game. We know what we got coming towards us. Who we playing against. The team that we playing. We just got to go out there and go over there and take over their home field. One point blank period on Thursday night. Big night football. We just got to go out there and balls out. Play ball.
Thank you, Larry.
Thanks, Leotis.
This is the game that is like, yep, that's the one you should have won. That's their season. And where their season could have gone after that is all dictated based on how poorly they gave away this game.
It felt the Scott Chandler doing this in the back of the end zone with the ball right there and he can't quite grab it. That's what I thought. That was that season, in a nutshell. We're this close. If just one or two little things could go our way, we would have finished it off. And it was just one of those Bills games that you could not get out of your head. And again, against the Chiefs at home.
I believe that was the game. At the end of the game, they had 4 shots at the end zone with Kyle Orton within 10 to 15 yards of the end zone.
They were at the 15 where they got stopped there.
The red zone offense was a big topic that year. It was one of the worst in the league. And Orton took 4 shots at the end zone, essentially. And they came up short. And it was like after all of that happened, they still had the shot. And they couldn't get it done. And that's when you kind of knew the Orton magic was starting to run out. And, it wasn't going to last. And then Leotis McKelvin's press conference, that still might be my favorite press scrum that I've ever been in. I could hardly understand half of what he was saying, but with his thick Southern accent, but some of the things he's just so candid, so honest. What was going through your head when you fumbled the ball? I mean, his quotes, right? Oh no, I dropped the ball. And I mean, he was just great. And then he vowed that on a short week they were going to go down and beat the Dolphins, point blank period, no question about it. And I was like, all right, let's see it.
Yeah, let's see it, Leotis. Well, in that game against the Dolphins, Leotis breaks his ankle and he's done for the year. But yeah, you talk about the red zone offense just stinking up the joint. Bills open the game with a 14-play, 67-yard drive. Then a 17-play, 85-yard drive resulted in a total of 6 points, 2 field goals. And, you have 2 plays that combine 31 plays on over 2 drives, and you get 6 points. The defense was great. Tannehill was sacked 5 times, forced 2 fumbles, but the Dolphins led 12-9 at the start of the 4th. Dan Carpenter missed a field goal. Dolphins marched right on down. Jarvis Landry touchdown. Dolphins win 22-9. I remember being at this game on a Thursday night and just the Bills just laid an egg. They just were just the defense was great, but the offense could not do anything.
It wasn't so much about this game. It was about the 5-day period where they had gone from 5-3 and, as Matt pointed out, maybe to 5-5 and no, it's not happening. This is the same old Bills, and it had happened, that fast. That's how it felt. Even though in both games, they dominated the Kansas City game, and for as bad as they did red zone wise with that Dolphins game, it was 12-9, 10-9, whatever it was
at the start of the fourth.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so they still had a chance.
The Bills have scored only one offensive touchdown in their last 2 games, and they've gone 21 straight drives without a score. A promising 5-3 start has come to a screeching halt.
We've got to finish and execute. We got to finish and execute. We got to make sure that everybody's comfortable in exactly what they're doing. But what it comes down to is putting them in the right position and them executing. And it's really as simple as that.
Just not good enough. Whatever the reason is, we'll have to go back and watch the tape. But our performance isn't good enough right now. Try to get better, and it starts with the quarterback. My job is to put points on the board.
I don't know what's going on. We just got to execute and keep playing hard. And it's very upsetting that we get down there 3 and 4 times and don't score 3 points. And being a wideout, you want to score touchdowns and have fun and celebrate.
That was a carryover from that Kansas City game, and just being losing a little bit of faith in how the end of that game went, and knowing that maybe earlier in the season in one of Orton's first games they would have been able to pull it out on the road, but they just didn't have it in them. Their running game was starting to disappear because of the injuries, and like you mentioned, that's when you started to say, that's not a playoff team.
No. Wednesday, November 19th, in the aftermath of those 2 heartbreaking losses, a snowstorm for the ages pounds Western New York. Orchard Park sees 71 inches of snow, and this was just pure lake effect snow, just pummeling specific areas of Western New York. And we all know how lake effect snow works. I remember, being in Rochester on that day, and if I had to do, outdoor chores or whatever, I would have had to rake leaves.
Yeah.
We didn't get any snow.
I believe I did rake leaves that day.
See, there you go. You live in Orchard Park. How painful and how bad was that week?
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I remember when I moved, I didn't know much of anything about Buffalo, having never been there. I was like, okay, the stadium's in Orchard Park, that's where I'm going to move. Took the first apartment I found, and that snowstorm, earlier in the week they were saying 1 to 2 feet maybe. And I thought, okay, I got to get to the grocery store, plan out,
milk and bread.
My first snowstorm on my own. I'm going to do this. Everything will be fine. That night, they said, it won't start until later. I was like, I got time to go to the gym. I leave the gym, and I can't see anything. It probably took me a usual 10 to 15 minute drive from the gym back to my apartment. It took me well over an hour. And I didn't leave my apartment after that until that Friday, when they moved practice to Detroit. And even then, the travel ban was still in effect. It was one of those crazy things where you're like, okay, 1 to 2 feet is what they said, so I'm prepared for the worst. And it just kept falling. It stopped for a couple hours, and then it was like, here's the second storm, here's the third storm. And I remember, luckily my internet still worked, and I'm scrolling through Twitter, and there's people that live in downtown Buffalo. They're like, oh, we got a dusting. And I'm just like, I couldn't wrap my head around. I was like, what is going on? I picked the wrong spot to live, but I was at the same time right in the heart of the action, which was kind of cool. But man, to this day, I've never seen anything like it.
The wall of snow that pummeled Western New York this week also took its toll on the Bills. An estimated 220,000 tons of snow landed on Ralph Wilson Stadium and One Bills Drive. With many Bills snowed in, they took to social media. For some of the Bills that grew up in the South, the winter weather was hardly welcomed. But as Western New Yorkers show in times like this, the Bills, too, showed resiliency and made do with the November downfall. Buffalo is known as the city of good neighbors, and nothing exemplified that more than on Tuesday when the storm was at its worst. Doug Marrone was on his way to the stadium and he noticed a car stuck on Abbott Road, so he got out and helped. He wasn't alone. Several people were out lending a helping hand to stranded motorists.
I wound up getting about 5 miles from the office, and I was right outside Mercy Hospital. I can't say enough for the people of Buffalo. It was really an unbelievable experience. I mean, people were helping each other. People were helping people get to the hospital. People from the hospital were going out. The people were trying to plow, move the streets. It was just, I don't think words can describe it. Everyone was just trying to help each other. It was a really amazing sight to see. And I was just doing my part, but my part was very, very limited to what other people, how brave they were.
On November 20th, the NFL moves the Jets-Bills game, the upcoming game, from Orchard Park to Detroit. Thad, you were going to this game with John. Just what was that like planning out? Okay, we're going to go to Orchard Park on Sunday, and now we're definitely not. And I don't know how we're even going to get to Detroit because there's 5 feet of snow on the ground.
Well, fortunately for us in Rochester, there wasn't any travel ban or any issue. So, when the game got moved and the practice times were scheduled, we just went. I just said, do I have enough time to make it there? Okay, I do, and go. And I drew, going through Buffalo to the north, there wasn't that much of an issue. I mean, I drove straight to Detroit without having any problem.
Through Canada, you didn't go through
Yeah,
Ohio.
exactly. Yeah, I went through Canada. So it wasn't a problem at all for us. It was weird, though, I'm going to go cover Bills practice 5 hours away at this practice facility I've never been to before. I'm going to come in and, where's the media room? Where do we go? Where am I allowed to go? What do you want me to do? What do I cover? Where do we do interviews? How do we send anything back? And I think it was me and you and Joe Biscaglia and
there weren't many of us.
Jay Skirsky.
Jay made it, and I think that might have been it. And I don't even know how I got there to this day. Like, I don't understand how I made it there in time because as a beat reporter, it was any availability I had to get to or I wanted to be there. And I missed them. They were available at the airport. And I missed that because I couldn't get from, it would have taken me hours to get from Orchard Park to Cheektowaga to the airport. So I, finally got word that they were going to practice in Detroit. And then I have to clear, that's an extra budget thing that, people don't factor in. And that's 4 nights in a hotel and another road game. And so I'm calling my boss, he's like, if you can safely get out, get there. It took me, the travel ban was still in effect, so I had to, uncover my car and, which was completely buried. But to your point, the weirdest part of it was, I pulled out and it felt like I was on a ski trail, if you've ever been skiing. Like, that's what the roads felt like, because they were so high and there was people walking on jet ski or on snowmobiles or jet skis. That would have been something. They're on snowmobiles and
cross-country skis.
They're walking to the grocery store, getting all their groceries. It took me hour and a half, hour 45 minutes to get out of Orchard Park, and I got on the thruway, and it was clear.
Yeah.
I drove through Canada, and it was like it was still fall in Canada, and meanwhile behind me there was 7 feet of snow. The weirdest part was I got back, almost all of the snow was gone.
Yeah.
Because it got so warm, it all melted. Yeah. The stadium had flooding issues. What a weird, weather is weird.
Yeah, weather is weird.
So we're up there too. I mean, John, I went up there myself on Friday, I think it was.
Yep.
John came up on Sunday, and John wanted to do stories from just be in the stadium as if we were there normal. And for whatever reason, we had trouble with sending something back, or John wanted to do something. We ended up watching an entire Sunday afternoon of football from empty Ford Field by ourselves. It was me and John and the custodian and maybe the security guard. And I remember sitting in the middle of the field on top of the newly painted Bills logo on the stadium, looking up at the Jumbotron and watching whatever game was on at 1 o'clock. That was my football Sunday for the day in that, and we stayed there until 10 o'clock. John, different story that we won't get into in this. I don't know why we did it, but that's what I remember from that, is watching NFL football by myself on a Jumbotron at a football stadium.
So the NFL says that this game is free. Anybody who wants to go to this game can go to this game. Season ticket holders can have first preference on seats in between the 20s. 55,000 people showed up, and that, I don't know what credit or what, you're insane if you went to Detroit. But hey, more power to you. And the Bills go out and they throttle the Jets, 38-3. Boobie Dixon blocks a punt, has a rushing touchdown of his own. Michael Vick sacked 5 times. He gets hurt in Coach Geno Smith. He's sacked 2 more times. The Bills lead the league in sacks at this point. And and then the moment that I remember, and I think a lot of people remember, is Kyle Orton throwing the touchdown pass to Scott Chandler and the shoveling out the snow celebration.
No, it was kind of one of those things where I was like, hey man, I need to do something to show the people back home that we're thinking about them. And I was saying I broke 2 shovels this week, one of my own, and then I broke my neighbor's. So that was the only shovel I had, was the one I used right there. So I'm going to be going to Home Depot this week, buying one for me and one for my neighbor Steve.
To culminate a wild, unimaginable week with a 35-point Bills win, just filing and doing reports after all of that, what was that like?
The 2 things about that game, I remember, were the Chandler celebration and the fact that I was like, I need to get Rex Ryan video because he's going to be fired in a couple months. And I got to make sure I have some stuff of him from after this game. But it was for Bills fans and for the Bills, it was the way that week had to end because, nothing had gone right in terms of the preparation other than the fact they found somewhere to play the game. And so the fact that the Bills didn't, fall on their face and lose to a team they had no business losing to, as they had proven 3 weeks earlier, was, the positive to take out of that.
We wanted to give the people back in our region a chance to smile a little bit, by the way we played. I told you that, that's how I feel, that, it's more important, for them than it is anything else. And, I'm just proud of this football team.
I had no idea how they were going to respond on Monday night. I had zero clue. We knew they were a better team than the Jets. The Jets didn't necessarily get better preparation. I guess they got to practice at home before they traveled and all that. But they weren't prepared to play Monday Night Football in Detroit either. And so that was unexpected for them too. But I just had no clue what to expect out of the Bills. And for them to respond that way, again, a credit to a team that was, better than most in the drought and probably slightly underappreciated in that way. A couple balls break their way in certain games, and they're a playoff team. But that game was one where I thought, all right, as goofy as Doug Marrone can be, and as dumb as some of his play calls are, he clearly has the team under control. Because to go through that week and come out with a win in Detroit, a win like that was wild, and I just didn't know coming into it that they would respond that way.
Buffalo, baby, they're for the South Towns. They're for the South Towns.
The following day, Ralph Wilson Stadium is open for business. The following Sunday, the Cleveland Browns come to the Ralph, and Dante Whitner talked junk all week long with anybody that wanted to interact with him on social media.
That's just him doing what he does, At the same time, it's annoying and it's just dumb for him to do and talk about people like that and talk about the city of Buffalo like that. But at the same time, you just kind of, take it with a grain of salt and say it's just some dude that's being an idiot about some stuff.
And the Bills were more than willing to dish it right back to the Cleveland Browns. Kyle Orton has a touchdown. The offense still isn't great. Dan Carpenter has 5 field goal attempts, makes 4 of them. Jerry Hughes has forces a fumble, recovers it, returns it for a touchdown. First touchdown of his career, full stop. Brian Hoyer picked twice by Denora Searcy. And in comes Money Johnny Manziel. And I remember I was here for this game in Rochester, and a ho-hum game on November 30th between the Browns and Bills never moves the needle nationally. And then, Brian Hoyer's, getting beat around by the Bills. Will they turn to Manziel? And you kind of heard the rumblings. And then CBS shows a shot of him on the sideline warming up, and as if the whole nation converged on Orchard Park to see the rookie, Johnny Manziel, in NFL action. Leads the Browns on a touchdown drive. He scores a rushing touchdown of his own, does the money celebration, and then Kyle Williams knocked him into outer space. And we really haven't seen Johnny Manziel since then, to be honest. The Bills win 26-10, but just to cover a game that nobody is talking about to all of a sudden being the #1 game in the country.
It was one of the few regular season games that I was more excited about what would happen in garbage time than what happened during the game. Because how many Bills games have you been to? Not that many for you yet, but you'll get there. Where it's out of hand in the middle of the third quarter, and you're just, when's this going to end? Once the Bills got in control of this game, you were waiting for the Manziel moment because it was, and there was a buzz in the crowd when he came into the game as well. And he goes on the field. I can still remember I had it zoomed in nice and tight, the money fingers. It made that terrible, one of the many, football-wise, terrible Bills-Browns games. It made the end of it enjoyable.
He looked pretty good.
Yeah, he did.
He looked pretty good. But the lasting image will be after Kyle Williams hit him, he lost the ball, and he's just lying in the end zone like this. And
because of the tuck rule, it's an incomplete pass, which is just brutal.
And he is just lying there, and for some reason his arms are like this, and you're like, he looks like he's playing dead or something. And it's kind of a very nice summary of his career.
Yeah.
That picture, just him lying there.
As defenses are running by him, with
stuff is still happening around him. Football things are happening, and he's just lying there. He could not give any bothers whatsoever. It was definitely a treat to see Johnny Manziel. I had seen him in person the year before in college, but that was to see his pro debut there was pretty funny.
Yeah, no bothers given would be a good way to put the Manziel era in the NFL. Wednesday, December 3rd, Toronto series officially dead. Long may it rain. December 7th, in Denver, the Bills taking on the Broncos in Week 14 with a 7-5 record, and coming up 2 games against Hall of Fame quarterbacks Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers. And for the first time since 2010, Peyton Manning has a game without a touchdown pass. The Bills defense was very strong in this game. Corey Graham, Stephon Gilmore both pick off Manning. But the Bills offense is bad. Even though Kyle Orton throws for 355 yards, he needed 57 passing attempts. That's a lot. And but what we all talked about after this game, of course, is the response that Doug Marrone had to questions about punting in the fourth quarter, particularly when the Bills were down 2 scores with about 10 minutes to go, and he chose to punt on 4th and 2. And I remember being standing on the field in Denver, being like, "Wait, why is the punter? What are we doing? No, don't do that." And then he got ripped for it, and then he rolled his eyes to Joe Biscaglia about a question about it.
Still.
Doug, you brought up 4th down, going for it on the 1 down.
Yeah, it was going to be hard to win back Bills fans after this game.
It wasn't just that, too. It was the Kyle Orton bailing out on the 3rd and 1 rush, in the third quarter where he's going right and had what looked like room to get to a first down and just took a knee. And, later on when he retired 4 weeks later unexpectedly, people went back to that and said, well, maybe he was protecting himself there, not thinking about the Bills. But there were plenty of opportunities for the Bills to do better in that game, and it felt like more strategy than physical. Obviously, the Broncos were better, but there were things where this wasn't just about physical talent or Peyton Manning being an all-time quarterback. The Bills did some weird Billsy things in this game.
Again, they hung with a really good team.
Mm-hmm.
Like that Bills team wasn't all that bad, and that defense on some Sundays was as good as any in the league. And there were a few penalties that didn't go their way. I remember Jerry Hughes being particularly upset after that game. Corey Graham as well. It was one of those games where they weren't supposed to win it by any stretch of the imagination, and yet they probably should have.
Yeah.
And again, those frustrating moments you point to during such a long drought, when you're sitting there thinking, man, they held Peyton Manning without a touchdown and they lost. What a waste. And what a great effort they wasted. And that's probably the game that sort of broke their back in the end, even though they hung around and stayed in the hunt. Throughout the end of the season.
That was the backup title for this show. So C.J. Anderson rushes for 3 touchdowns in this game. Bills commit 11 penalties, to your point, for 98 yards.
It's always going to be tough to win when you're killing yourselves like that with penalties. We can't do that. We can't allow our emotions to get the better of us. I mean, it goes both ways, though.
If we don't turn the ball over and we don't get penalties, we're going to score. We're going to be fine. Our defense is going to hold people to not very many points. They're great defense, and we just have to play smart on offense.
That's my fault. I can't do that on the sideline and not expect the team to react, to how I react, and that's where I let the team down today. I told them that in the locker room. That's on me.
The other thing that emerges out of this game is after Jerry Hughes has a personal foul penalty, or an unsportsmanlike penalty, he's benched. And Marrone is unaware that Pepper Johnson kept him benched.
That's on me. I can't do that. So, yeah. We're the defense. Our job is to go out there and stop points. So, I mean, short field, it really shouldn't matter for us. We just got to go out there and execute and just not self-inflict ourselves. I mean, we can't give him extra possessions.
And so now everything is just swirling around the Bills. Is who's in charge? Nobody knows what's going on here. Marrone seems lost and in over his head. He's punting on 4th and 2, down 2 scores in the fourth quarter, which, anywhere you look at it, you haven't made the playoffs in 15 years. Go for it. Just do this. And I just remember, this was the moment when Bills fans really started going after Marrone.
And all that said, they still have a winning record right now.
And they still are 7-6. Yeah, and have their best win of the season the following week because Week 15 the Green Bay Packers come to the Ralph. Marcus Thigpen has a 75-yard punt return for a touchdown, the only touchdown the Bills would score in this game. But the defense was outstanding. Dan Carpenter kicks 4 field goals, and then with 1:58 to go and the Bills up by 5, Mario Williams forces a safety on Aaron Rodgers, and because of the holy roller rule, you can't advance a fumble with under 2 minutes to go. So as soon as Eddie Lacy picks up the ball in the end zone, it's a safety. Nobody on the field knew it because I guarantee you that because I was there. That response after that game is people are going crazy as the Bills go to 8-6. They beat Aaron Rodgers. Boobie Dixon picks up Terry Pagula after the game ends. That one rivals the Miami game to me for just the loudest Bills crowd. as the Bills knock off the Packers.
Never I remember Aaron Rodgers looking so frustrated and flustered and uncomfortable on a field in a game. And the Bills had him. They owned him the whole game. There was one play where Jordy Nelson had a wide open touchdown, he dropped it, whatever. The Bills defense was in charge of this game. And I think coming out of this game, because even at 8-6, the playoff chances, if I remember correctly, weren't great.
Less than 10%.
They were 2 wins and still needed quite a bit of help. But we thought they were all going to be dead after that game. Coming out of that game, there was the feeling of this defense was more than playoff worthy. And the Bills have pissed it away with E.J. Manuel and Kyle Orton.
I'm so proud of my teammates. We prepared so hard this week. We felt like last week we did a good job as well, but we knew that this is another big test for us, and we prepared our butts off the whole week. We got together and did everything possible, so it's a big statement game.
Rambo came in, he made some tremendous plays. We had a lot of PBUs back there. I mean, those guys played well. I mean, it just shows how well they are prepared week in and week out to kind of shut out 2 top-tier quarterbacks back-to-back like that. That speaks volumes of them and their preparations.
I can tell you, I've never been as confident as the last series going in. We go out on the last series, so these guys have no timeouts and they have to throw the ball. You can't run it, you can't do draws, you don't have enough time on the clock. We've got players up front that, I like that matchup. When all that work kind of comes together and, we win a football game against a great team, you create turnovers and you win the football game, it's always a blast.
I'm just happy right now, man. We doing this for Buffalo, the whole community, we trying to break the streak.
Aaron Rodgers looking so ordinary was a complete shock. One of the most shocking games of that season that had many. He was lost. And even that throw to Jordy Nelson, that was basically the only throw where he looked like he had any sort of rhythm or knew where he wanted to go with the ball. And this is Aaron Rodgers a week after they did the exact same thing to Peyton Manning, and you start to think, man, this defense is clicking, firing on all cylinders at the exact right time, and you're doing the math and you're saying, all right, they go to Oakland and they win that game. Maybe they have a shot, in Week 17 if the Patriots rest some starters. Maybe they can be 10-6 and make some noise. But this season, we wouldn't be doing this show. That's how that
Well,
worked
and that's
out.
the thing. Bakaria Rambo picks off Aaron Rodgers twice. Rambo, who was a guy they signed off the street just the month before. And I remember when the schedule came out for this season, and Thad, you and I, we discussed who gets to cover which games, and I happened to land the Denver Green Bay games back to back, and thinking I get to see Peyton Manning and I get to see Aaron Rodgers. Like, I can tell my grandkids I saw these Hall of Fame quarterbacks do Hall of Fame things. They were terrible in these 2 games, and I'll just say, I saw them beat Aaron Rodgers, and Peyton Manning looked like a 38-year-old quarterback or whatever he was at the time. So the Bills win. They go to 8-6. First season above 500 since 2004.
At that point in the year.
Yeah. I mean, with 8 wins, they're guaranteed a 500 season or above. But the playoff math, they need to win out, and there are 5 teams. The Bills can only allow 2 of them. The Bills can only afford to have 2 of them reach 10 wins. It was Baltimore, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, and San Diego. 3 of them got to 10 wins. Even if they had won out, it wouldn't have mattered because the Bills wouldn't have had the math, because they had none of the tiebreakers because of some bad losses like to Kansas City and San Diego.
It still doesn't make the Oakland game the next week any less disappointing, because that was a 3-12, whatever it was, 4-12 team, and that was a game they should have won. It was a test of, can the Bills not be the Bills in a spot where they usually are the Bills? And that's what happened. They went out to Oakland, and Marcel Darius gets hurt, and the run defense was completely different without him in the second half. But all that being said, it's 3rd and 85,000 yards, and Derek Carr heaves one up to now current Bill, Andre Holmes, who pulls in for a 50-yarder. And I remember I was behind the play because I'm thinking, there's no way they're getting a first down.
On 3rd and 22.
Exactly. Yeah. I want to be back here just in case the Bills force a sack fumble, maybe score a touchdown. And I'm watching this ball, and I see a guy catch it. I'm like, are you kidding? The Bills? Being the Bills again? And end of the season.
Corey Graham blew the coverage bad, and he did not like himself for it after the game. That was... I couldn't believe, as shocked as I was that they beat the Packers, I was shocked how badly they blew that Oakland game.
It wasn't even a hard play, if you ask me. I mean, the ball was just thrown up for grab. He just threw it up. If I can do it over with, I will go for the pass breakup, make the safe play. I try to go for the interception, misjudge it. So it is on me. It's definitely a play that I got to make, and it's unfortunate that we come to Oakland and not find a way to get a victory.
It's very disappointing. I mean, especially when everything seemed like it was working out in our favor.
went the opposite way on us. We didn't make enough plays. We let them stick around in the game, and it came back and bit us.
Nobody's more disappointed than us in this locker room. You know, we have a lot of fans that follow us and support us. They want it bad too. You know, everybody in this locker room is let down and disappointed.
They kicked our butt up front, you know, and when you do that, it's difficult to run, pass, do a lot of things. And we weren't able to do a lot of things.
Yep, opening drive of the game, Orton to Watkins, a 42-yard touchdown. The following 5 drives, 3 and out for the Buffalo Bills. Every single one of them. Lose 26-24. They are officially eliminated from the playoffs for a 15th straight year. And the season's not over yet. It's unbelievable, 2014. Marrone says he's been given no assurances on his future. Sunday, December 28th, morning of the game, Jason LaCanfora arrives again, reports that Whaley and Marrone have a strained relationship. Whaley is under review by ownership, and could Chris Polian be the new GM of the Buffalo Bills after the season ends? And this, again, coming the morning of a game. And even though it is the final game of the season and the Bills have been eliminated, but just another instance of LaCanfora, and Schefter and other guys have too, but I think LaCanfora and Tim Graham for these types of stories with big Bills news the morning of football games. But the Bills go out, I guess to their credit. Tom Brady only plays 5 drives in this game, but the Bills win 17-9. They win at Gillette Stadium. They finally have done it. A 12-game losing streak comes to an end.
Tom Brady did not play the second half, and the game was meaningless for the Patriots. We'll certainly leave a giant asterisk on this win. As for what the Bills think,
you don't care. You know, you come in here to win a football game. You know, and that's what we were able to do and what we got accomplished today. You know, in the National Football League, everybody that's on the opposite side of the ball to you, is capable of making plays. So, whoever you're going against, you have to bring your A game and do whatever you can to get a win. And we're able to do that today.
I don't want to hear no excuse about they didn't play, whoever they didn't play. I mean, those guys get paid as well. You know, they wouldn't be on the team if they didn't have, their playmaking abilities. So, we all showed up. They showed up. They played as well as we played. We just were the better team today.
No 100-yard rushers for the Buffalo Bills in any game in the 2014 season. First time they had done that since 1979. Bills end the season 9-7, but the fun ain't even over yet because there's still 3 days left of the 2014 calendar. Monday, December 29th on Locker Cleanout Day, Pro Football Talk reports that Doug Marrone has an out clause in his contract, has 3 days to decide whether or not he will terminate his contract. But the expectation is he's not going to do that. Right. Bills went 9-7. Yeah, their quarterback situation's kind of a mess, but you went 9-7. The defense is fantastic. You figure out the quarterback position. This is a playoff team in 2015 because it's not E.J. Manuel. We all know this. And then during Locker Cleanout, Kyle Orton comes, sees the assembled media over at his locker, sees us there, and he says to me and everyone else around, I got to go to a meeting, fellas, but I'll be back and I'll talk. It's pretty standard. Quarterback gives his season review in the final day of the season in Locker Cleanout. About 45 minutes later, I believe it was Chris Jenkins, the member of the Bills PR staff, comes out and says that Kyle Orton has retired. And we all went, what? What? And just stunned. And other guys are in the locker room cleaning out their lockers. We're breaking the news to them.
Yeah, this is the first I'm hearing of it. So,
are you shocked by this one?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that in talking to him, I didn't expect him to announce it so soon or to announce it at all.
Past couple of weeks, he just say his last year or whatever, just not knowing what his future was, but he did bring it up or mention it, I would say.
So you were expecting it then?
I mean, doesn't surprise me. I wouldn't say I expecting it, but it doesn't surprise me.
Oh man, I wish him the best. I learned a lot from him this year. As far as preparing to be a pro. He definitely brought a type of intensity to the room. That made us better, and really hate to see him go. Because like I say, he was a competitor. And he made everybody else better.
I told him, I recommend that you take some time and think about it before you come to a decision. But he said that he was ready, and in this game you got to respect the player's decisions.
That was quite a day to see Uncle Rico pull an Irish goodbye and ride off into the sunset without telling anybody. Bye, Kyle Orton.
You were at ground zero for that story. I mean, it was just I've been to many locker cleanouts as well and never had anything even remotely close to that. And like you were saying, the idea of I'm going to go do this, but I'll be back is fairly standard. It's not a shocking thing in of itself.
We all were like, oh, okay, well, we'll get back. We'll get Kyle
Right.
when he comes back.
And even
that time, Dad went to the store for milk.
he didn't come home.
And he never came home. You know what I'll remember too is that was a long day because there was all the Marrone Whaley stuff swirling, and so we were there for a long time. You know, early flight from Boston, and I left to go get lunch. You know, we had a little bit of a break in the action, and I drove back, and as I was going through, passing the security booth there, Kyle Orton was coming the other way.
No way.
And to this day, I say, I never saw a bigger smile on Kyle Orton's face. We talk about all those last-minute touchdowns, everything he did. That guy was grinning ear to ear. He took his money and he ran. He was
amazing.
Never to be heard from again. And I mean, why not? Yeah. He picked up an easy $5 million and, you know, wanted to be with his kids and didn't really owe anybody an explanation, I guess, but it was a hilarious exit.
Yeah.
In retrospect, because you can't even be that upset if you're a Bills fan. It's Kyle Orton, for crying out loud. But just one of those gut punches that Bills fans get. It's like, oh, Kyle Orton's a pretty decent quarterback, something to build on. And he's like, yeah, I'm out of here too. Like,
without even a word.
Come on.
Yeah.
Without even a word.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I haven't looked into this, but have we heard from Kyle Orton since then? Has he talked to anybody? Has there been any stories written?
I can't think of any. I think
went off the grid.
He's been out there, but not
he's
not
always
much.
been that way, though. He's very, you know, to himself.
Like Jake Plumberish a little bit.
Real into like politics and stuff. He's an interesting guy, but he just really can't stand the media. So that's part of why he keeps.
The media
so
was
quiet.
pretty hard to him in the early part of his career. There were some pictures of him that you know, of him enjoying alcohol, and hey, who among us? But I remember that, you know, from early in his career, and I always felt that he always looked at us skeptically, and you know, to the fact that he wouldn't go to the podium. You know, all of his press conferences would be at his locker, which is different from most quarterbacks. They have him at a podium so that everybody can kind of be there. He just didn't want anything to do with us. And yeah, he went out for cigarettes and milk and never came back. And then 2 days later, on Christmas Eve, the final day of 2014, the final day of the 3-day window for Doug Marrone to decide on his contract.
Now, News 8 Sports with Prescott Rossi.
Doug Marrone is no longer the Buffalo Bills head coach. The announcement came down just over 10 minutes ago. In a statement from Terry Pegula issued just at about 6:09, quote, Doug Marrone informed me late today that he has decided to exercise the option clause in his contract and relinquish his responsibilities as our head coach. We are disappointed that Coach Marrone will no longer be an important part of our organization. We thank him for all of the hard work and leadership during his tenure and wish him and his family the best with the next chapter in their lives. Well then, here is our Buffalo Blitz. Marrone had a window of 3 days to opt out in his contract once the season ended. The window is set to expire at midnight. Pegula's statement continues saying, quote, we will now begin the important process of conducting a thorough search for a new head coach as we continue to strive to reach our goal of returning to the playoffs and bringing a championship to Buffalo for our fans.
Takes his 2015 salary of $4 million along with him. Doug Marrone opts out of his contract after leading the Bills to their first winning record since 2004.
Very surprised. I still remember the moment. You know, you and I are in the sports office. There's a one long desk with two computers. I was at one working on my show. You were at the other one. And you're just keeping an eye on Twitter, doing your own thing. And all of a sudden you say, he's out. He's just done. And I'm like, you're kidding. No, Doug Marrone is leaving. And, you know, for us in TV, you know, when he left at just before 6 was a terrible time because now everything we had done up until that point was completely meaningless. We had to completely redo our show. But I don't think, was there anyone who really thought Doug Marrone would opt out of that contract?
There was some chatter about it because why else would the out clause leak out, right?
Yeah.
You know, that got leaked out for a reason. And, you know, it started to lay the groundwork. There was talk about him maybe taking a run at the Michigan job, you remember, and
the Jets job too is available.
The
Rex
Jets job. Well, that is when, you know, he started, you know, getting wandering eyes a little bit. But to your point, he had a good team, a decent team that he could build on, and
stable ownership now for the first time.
It was unbelievable. I remember, you know, first New Year's Eve in Buffalo, there was a big snowstorm. I'm sitting in my apartment, essentially waiting on Doug. Like, come on, Doug. Because either way, whatever he decides is news. And I'm like, all right, Doug, anytime now. And he took his time. And that decision, I think, was pretty surprising to a lot of people. I was sort of prepared for everything because you have to be, but it's like, man, he's really leaving? Like, he might never get another job. Like, he must be confident he'll get another one. And the next few weeks, we're kind of monitoring that. Like, will he get another job? And he got left out in the cold. And now he's back on an NFL sideline as a head coach. He got pretty lucky. He's pretty fortunate that happened. But it's surprising, but not as surprising when you realize, hey, he got a free $4 million. And he didn't want to deal with Doug Whaley anymore. I mean, we'll never get the real reason from him, but it was pretty obvious he didn't want to deal with the front office anymore.
You got to compare, football life to real life. In real life, if you told me I could not work and still get $4 million, who wouldn't do that?
Right.
I mean, why would you not do that?
Yeah.
But there are only 32 of these jobs.
Well, exactly.
And there's the better question would be if I told you could have your salary for next year to not work, but there's no guarantee you'll ever get another job in television again. You might not take that deal. A little bit different because Doug's dealing with $4 million and already had plenty else in the bank, but
and I didn't think
that's what he worked for.
$4 million, I'm gone. Bye.
That's what he worked for his whole life, though, right? To be an NFL head coach.
Just dumped it.
And he just dumped it. It's not like this guy was like made of money. He obviously had plenty, but I mean, to get to that point, to get to the mountaintop, to get to 9-7, and then leave, it spoke, I thought, a lot to what was going on in the building. And things had to have been bad for him to leave, because why else would he leave? And as we saw unfold in the years after that, he maybe was pretty smart to leave because now he got another shot at it. Whereas if he had stuck around and waited for the train to crash, he might not have ever emerged.
And the risk was pretty great because you call it the mountaintop, 9-7, the mountaintop. Even in Syracuse, his mountaintop was 8-5, and the Pinstripe Bowl 2 years. So this wasn't a guy that had the resume to where, oh yeah, I'm going to walk away. I'm going to get another job.
You're sitting there. The mountaintop is being an NFL head coach. That's what he fought for. That's what he wanted. The dream job. His famous line at Syracuse. He had his dream job, and then he left, and that became his reputation, like as a guy, a quitter. And months later, he would say, "I didn't quit," blah blah blah. But I mean, he developed a reputation as a quitter because of that, especially in upstate New York. I still have people comment on my stories anytime I write about Doug Marrone, and it's constant. I mean, Syracuse fans hate him. Bills fans, I think half the fan base thought, oh,
we got rid of Doug. We didn't have to fire him.
Right, Terry didn't have the guts to fire him. Now he's gone. Like, sweet. And, careful what you wish for.
Yeah. Seriously. As a print guy, what were your interactions like with Doug?
I always say I actually enjoyed covering Doug more than people would probably think. Off to the side, I thought he was a very normal guy and a guy that, you could relate to. He had his insecurities and he had his, neurotic behavior and weird comments. He was very moody, but I always thought each day you were getting Doug Marrone in his, whatever he was feeling, he was just showing it. And he was nice enough off to the side and helpful in that way. And I think I grew to appreciate it more after we dealt with Rex Ryan and the show that became. Doug didn't offer up the easy headlines like Rex did, but he was a bit more cordial when the microphones were off, and I appreciated that about him. I really had no problems with him, although I understand a lot of the gripes that others had, and I was also only there for one of his 2 years.
Yeah, I just remember, to your point of, when he left thinking like, okay, they're going to bring in a coach that'll be a bit more aggressive, it won't be so conservative. The running joke was, how did Doug Marrone have the courage to put on pants in the morning? Because some of his play calling, I think there was something like 40 times he chose to punt in opponent's territory over the 2 years he was head coach of the Buffalo Bills. And to your point, when it comes to him interacting with the media, you knew what you got with Doug. If he was in a bad mood, he was going to be in a bad mood at the podium. And with Rex, who would come later, you knew who he wasn't playing to the room. He was playing to ESPN. He was playing to the blogosphere and which I understood.
Underline playing.
Yeah. But because if Rex Ryan walks out wearing a Clemson hat or a helmet, he does that because it gets an easy laugh in the Bills media room. But it gets him on at 6 o'clock on SportsCenter, 11 o'clock on every national sports show coast to coast. And so, yeah, we've strived over the course of the drought to find moments where the Bills have acted like a football team. And though there was no shortage of drama behind the scenes at One Bills Drive, especially in the second year under Doug Marrone, it felt like a football team. And with Rex it didn't. And with Chan it didn't. And who knows how it'll feel under Sean McDermott. It feels like a football team. But that was, with hindsight, I look at the Marrone era and go, yeah, I covered an NFL team for 2 seasons. Whereas the last 2 years with Rex were a circus. And with Chan, it felt minor league. And so I don't know if that credit to Marrone, I guess to a degree, though he could be moody and neurotic and all of those things which, would bug you and you go, oh, well, he's not going to say anything today. And but those are just my lasting memories of Marrone.
He was one of the guys he was a guy who coached one of the few winning seasons the Bills have had during the drought. That's got to say something positive about his job.
It says something. I mean, it's a very low bar.
9-7.
And so that helps, his legacy, if you will, if we could call it that. But I do think he deserves a lot of credit, especially when you look back. Just look at that legal pad. Look at all that stuff you read off about the team that happened. The snow game, the sale, Jim Kelly. There were a lot of distractions.
We didn't even talk about Mike Williams requesting a trade this year.
Mike Williams requesting the trade. I mean, Mike Williams being on the team to begin with is a distraction. I mean, Fred Jackson and C.J. Spiller get hurt. They make a quarterback change. All that, and you're still a player 2 away from being 10-6. I mean, it was not a bad coaching job by any stretch of the imagination. I think he deserved a lot of credit. Like you said, it felt like a football team, even though some guys on the Bills were real happy when Rex got here and gave them a little bit more leeway and made things a little bit more loose. Marrone was running a tight ship, and I don't know that maybe that was the ceiling. It's very possible, but I think he definitely did a good coaching job in 2014. I thought that was a pretty well-coached team for the most part, and the fact that they got to 9-7, I think was a surprise to most people.
Well, it's a tight ship run by Mr. Doug Marrone, but that ship be sinking because there's no head coach, there's no quarterback. Yes, the owner's here. The Bills are here to stay in Western New York, but oh man, everything else is on fire, and we're that little dog holding a cup like, yeah, no, this is fine. Everything's fine. And so for the next season, the 2015 season, if you watched all this, credit to you, viewer. To the next season of Down and Drought, we leave you. Goodbye, folks.